In the sweltering summer of 1944, as Allied forces shattered the German lines in Normandy, a shocking betrayal of trust nearly doomed the City of Light to a horrific bloodbath. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, had a plan to bypass Paris entirely, leaving its fate to a desperate uprising by French resistance fighters. Without support, thousands of civilians and patriots could have been slaughtered in brutal German reprisals, their lives sacrificed on the altar of cold military logic and clashing egos. Ego that pitted American strategy against French pride, costing precious lives in the streets where romance once bloomed. This is the untold tension behind the liberation of Paris, a story of betrayal, defiance, and the high price of freedom. Welcome to what de Gaulle said when Eisenhower blocked his Paris liberation. Plan Part 1. The Road to Paris Allied Tensions in 1944. The story begins in the chaotic aftermath of D-Day, June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Over 156,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, facing machine gun fire, mines, and fortified German defenses. Casualties were staggering. Nearly 10,000 Allied soldiers killed or wounded on that single day alone. But the beaches were secured, and the Allies punched through Hitler's Atlantic Wall. By late June, the port of Cherbourg fell to American forces, though the Germans had sabotaged it, delaying vital supplies. The British and Canadians slogged through brutal hedgerow country around Caen, where every field became a deadly ambush zone. General Bernard Montgomery's forces took heavy losses, up to 3/4 of their strength in some divisions, grinding down the Germans in attritional warfare. Then came the breakout. On July 25th, American forces under General Omar Bradley launched Operation Cobra. Carpet bombing pulverized German positions near Saint-Lô, though friendly fire tragically killed over 100 U.S. soldiers. But it worked. General George S. Patton's Third Army exploded eastward, encircling German troops in the Falaise pocket. By mid-August, the Allies had trapped some 50,000 Germans, with 10,000 killed and 40,000 captured. The Wehrmacht was in full retreat, leaving behind 50,000 dead and 200,000 prisoners across Normandy. The road to Paris was open. Allied tanks raced across northern France, liberating towns like Argentan and Falaise. By August 15th, a second invasion, Operation Dragoon, landed in southern France, racing up the Rhine Valley. The Germans were crumbling, but Paris loomed ahead, a glittering prize shrouded in peril. Enter Charles de Gaulle, the towering figure of Free France. A brigadier general in 1940, de Gaulle had fled to London after France's humiliating defeat, broadcasting his famous appeal of June 18th. France has lost a battle, but France has not lost the war. From exile, he rallied the Free French Forces exiles, colonial troops, and resistors who fought alongside the Allies in North Africa, Italy, and beyond. By 1944, de Gaulle was the undisputed leader of the Provisional Government of the French Republic, recognized by the Allies despite tensions. He insisted that French troops must liberate Paris first. Why? Politics and symbolism. Paris wasn't just a city. It was the heart of France's soul. De Gaulle feared that if Americans or British entered first, it would undermine French sovereignty and boost communist influence in the resistance. Paris must be liberated by French troops, he declared to Eisenhower on December 30th, 1943. His 2nd Armored Division under the fiery General Philippe Leclerc was equipped with American tanks and trained for this very moment. Leclerc's men, many from colonial Africa and Spain, burned with determination to reclaim their capital. De Gaulle's vision was clear: a French-led liberation would restore national pride, erase the shame of Vichy collaboration, and solidify his authority. Je suis la France, he once proclaimed. I am France. But this insistence would ignite a firestorm of tension. On the other side stood Dwight D. Eisenhower, the pragmatic American general tasked with winning the war in Europe. Ike's strategy was laser-focused. Destroy the German army, not get bogged down in symbolic victories. Paris, with its 2 million hungry residents, posed massive logistical nightmares. Feeding the city would require 4,000 tons of supplies, daily diverting trucks, fuel, and food from the front lines. We must have as replacement items each month 36,000 small arms, 700 mortar, 500 tanks, 2,400 vehicles, 100 field pieces, Eisenhower noted in a report, highlighting the voracious needs of his armies. Worse, urban warfare in Paris risked turning the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame into rubble. Ike envisioned Stalingrad-like street fighting with high casualties and delays. German General Dietrich von Choltitz had 20,000 troops in the city, fortified with machine guns and tanks. Hitler had ordered Paris defended to the last man, or reduced to a field of ruins. Bypassing Paris would isolate the garrison, forcing surrender without a fight. The best way to take the capital, Allied planners advised, would be to bypass and encircle it, then await the inevitable surrender. Eisenhower's broad front advance pushing evenly across France to the Rhine prioritized speed and supply lines over glory. Paris was a detour, a potential quagmire. We foresaw possible embarrassment, Ike later admitted, wary of intervening in French politics. These clashing visions fueled growing tensions among Allied leaders. De Gaulle's relationship with Franklin D. Roosevelt was poisonous. FDR saw de Gaulle as an apprentice dictator, a conceited upstart. He has a head like a banana and hips like a woman, quipped one British official. Roosevelt preferred dealing with Vichy remnants and froze French assets, refusing to recognize de Gaulle's government until October 1944. De Gaulle, in turn, viewed FDR's plans for Allied military government in France as an insult to sovereignty. Winston Churchill, de Gaulle's early champion, grew exasperated by his intransigence. De Gaulle is the name on every French person's lips, Churchill once said, but privately called him the last romantic. Yet Churchill backed de Gaulle against Roosevelt, seeing him as key to a strong post-war France. The establishment of a strong French army as soon as possible is absolutely necessary to balance insanity in Europe, Churchill declared in November 1944. Eisenhower navigated this minefield. He respected de Gaulle but prioritized victory. When de Gaulle threatened to detach Leclerc's division and march on Paris unilaterally, Ike relented, but not yet. Tensions boiled as de Gaulle warned of communist takeovers if Paris fell into chaos. The ongoing insurrection strengthened the French communists, de Gaulle argued. Eisenhower, ever the diplomat, promised French primacy but held firm on strategy. By mid-August, the powder keg ignited. On August 14th, communist-led resistance groups sparked labor strikes and attacks on Wehrmacht patrols. Paris police joined the rebellion the next day, abandoning posts. On August 19th, the French forces of the interior united under Henry Roll-Tanguy launched a full uprising. Barricades rose in the streets. Snipers picked off German soldiers. The resistance seized the prefecture of police and Hôtel de Ville, printing calls to arms. The Germans responded with fury. General von Choltitz, dubbed the savior of Paris later, initially unleashed reprisals. Hundreds of hostages were executed. Machine guns raked crowds. Civilians suffered horribly. Food shortages left Parisians starving, and reprisals claimed lives. One estimate: 1,000 resistance fighters killed, 1,500 wounded, with 600 civilians dead and 2,000 injured in the fighting. German bombers even struck after the liberation, killing 6 and wounding 36 in feeble revenge. As barricades burned and gunfire echoed through the boulevards, the uprising teetered on disaster. Ammunition ran low. Fighters exhausted. Choltitz considered Hitler's demolition orders bridges mined, landmarks rigged. Brent Paris? Is Paris burning? Hitler demanded. Without Allied intervention, the city faced annihilation. De Gaulle pleaded, "The fate of Paris is a fundamental concern." But Eisenhower resisted, fearing the diversion. "We probably will be compelled to go into Paris," he jotted in a note, sensing the inevitable. Suspense mounted as Leclerc's tanks idled, the resistance bled, and Paris hung in the balance. Eisenhower's refusal hit like a thunderclap. Paris, the heart of France, was to be bypassed, left to starve, to fight alone, or worse, to burn under Hitler's scorched earth orders. For Charles de Gaulle, this was unthinkable. The man who had rallied Free France from exile would not stand idly by while his capital bled. Defiance was his only option. De Gaulle's reaction was immediate and volcanic. In heated meetings and frantic letters, he confronted the Allied commanders. He warned Eisenhower that delaying would lead to catastrophe, not just military, but political. The French resistance, already rising in open revolt, faced annihilation if abandoned. De Gaulle's words carried the weight of desperation and unyielding pride. He threatened to detach Leclerc, 2nd Armored Division, from Allied Command and send it racing to Paris alone, bypassing Schaeff entirely. This was no idle bluff. De Gaulle knew the stakes: another Warsaw, where the Polish uprising was crushed while allies watched from afar. He didn't stop at private fury. De Gaulle used every channel to pressure the Allies. Through intermediaries and direct appeals, he painted a picture of impending chaos, a city in flames, communists seizing power in the vacuum, or German reprisals drowning Paris in blood. His radio messages, broadcast via the BBC and clandestine networks, stirred the French spirit, urging Parisians to hold on while demanding Allied action. "France demands her capital!" became the unspoken cry. Meanwhile, inside Paris, the crisis reached breaking point. Since August 19th, the uprising had erupted with ferocious energy. Police, workers, and resistance fighters, Gaullists, communists, nationalists seized key buildings: the Prefecture de Police, City Hall, railway stations. Barricades rose from felled trees, overturned vehicles, and sandbags. The tricolor flew defiantly again, but heroism met harsh reality. Ammunition dwindled dangerously. Many fighters had only pistols, homemade grenades, or captured German rifles with scant rounds. German counterattacks hammered back relentlessly, tanks rumbling through boulevards, snipers picking off exposed insurgents, artillery pounding strongholds. Civilians paid the heaviest price. Families caught in crossfire, women tending wounded amid rubble, children dodging bullets to carry messages. By late August, hundreds lay dead, over 900 FF fighters and nearly 600 civilians in the week's brutal street battles. Food vanished, water supplies faltered, and the specter of famine loomed. German commander Dietrich von Choltitz, under Hitler's direct order to raze Paris, prepared demolition charges on bridges, monuments, and factories. The City of Light teetered on the edge of darkness. De Gaulle refused to let it happen. In a series of intense confrontations, he pressed Eisenhower harder. On August 21st to 22nd, as reports of the uprising's peril flooded in, De Gaulle warned of serious trouble unless French troops led the way. He invoked national honor, the need to prevent communist domination, and the moral imperative to save Paris from destruction. Eisenhower, initially steadfast, felt the pressure mount from de Gaulle's threats, from the humanitarian crisis, and from the risk of partisan chaos that could undermine the entire campaign. The turning point came on August 22nd. Eisenhower relented. In what became a secret compromise, he authorized the diversion. General Leclerc's French 2nd Armored Division equipped with American Shermans but fiercely. French would spearhead the assault, supported by the U.S. 4th Infantry Division. French troops would enter first, allowing de Gaulle to claim the liberation as France's own triumph. It was pragmatic politics wrapped in military necessity. Eisenhower avoided a full bypass disaster while giving de Gaulle the symbolic victory he craved. Leclerc, eager and emotional, received the order with jubilation. "Go fast," de Gaulle urged him. "We cannot have another commune." The race was on. From Argentan, Leclerc's 16,000-men tanks roaring, half-tracks churning dust thunder toward Paris. Crowds cheered them along roadsides, throwing flowers, offering wine. Fierce skirmishes slowed them. German pockets fought desperately, but momentum built. On the night of August 24th, advance elements reached the Hôtel de Ville. Parisians erupted in joy, embracing the first French tanks under flickering streetlights. August 25th dawned with final fury. Leclerc's main force rolled in from the south, clashing with die-hard Germans in brutal street fights. By afternoon, von Choltitz surrendered at the Prefecture de Police first to Leclerc, then formally. Paris was free. De Gaulle arrived at Montparnasse station around 4 p.m., stepping on a soil he had fled 4 years earlier. He moved swiftly, Ministry of War, Prefecture de Police, then to the Hôtel de Ville. There, amid a roaring crowd of resistance fighters, civilians, and jubilant Parisians, de Gaulle delivered his immortal words. Standing tall on the balcony, voice steady despite the emotion, he proclaimed, "Paris outraged, Paris broken, Paris martyred, but Paris liberated. Liberated by itself, liberated by its people, with the help of the whole of France, that is to say, the France that fights, the only France, the true France, the eternal France." The crowd exploded. Tears streamed, fists punched the air. De Gaulle continued, calling for unity, gratitude to the Allies, and resolve to rebuild. It was raw, triumphant, unifying, a moment that sealed his legitimacy as France's leader. The next day, August 26th, came the iconic parade. De Gaulle, flanked by Leclerc and others, strode down the Champs-Élysées from the Arc de Triomphe. Massive crowds lined the avenue, waving flags, shouting "Vive de Gaulle!" Snipers, lingering Germans or collaborators, opened fire sporadically. Bullets cracked overhead. People ducked, but de Gaulle refused to flinch or duck. He walked on, a towering symbol of unbreakable will. At Notre Dame for the Te Deum, more shots rang out inside the cathedral, echoing chaos amid prayers. De Gaulle stood firm, refusing to cower. The incident only amplified his legend, a man protected by destiny. In the aftermath, de Gaulle emerged victorious politically. The liberation cemented his provisional government, sidelining communist rivals and Vichy remnants. France's pride was restored. The uprising and French-led entry proved the nation had fought for its freedom. Yet strains lingered. Allied relations, especially with the Americans, bore scars. Eisenhower's initial refusal seen as dismissive, de Gaulle's threats as insubordinate. Requests for U.S. divisions to stay in Paris were denied. Instead, symbolic American parades followed. but the legacy endures. Paris was saved, not razed, not starved, not lost to infighting. De Gaulle's defiance forced a compromise that preserved the City of Light and reshaped post-war France. If you enjoyed this deep dive into WW2 leadership clashes, like the raw tension between Allied strategy and French honor, hit that like button. Subscribe to History Facts WW2 for more untold stories, and comment below. Who was right, de Gaulle or Eisenhower?